My father-in-law pulled me aside during his 25th wedding anniversary party, gripped my arm a little too tight, and told me a penniless loser like me had no business standing anywhere near his 200 well-dressed guests. He pointed toward a narrow service hallway near the kitchen and told me to use the back door on my way out, the same door the catering staff used to haul out trash bags. I stood there in a dress that cost more than his car payment, watching him assume I still worked the front desk job I held 8 years earlier, the same job where his son first fell in love with me. He had no idea, gripping my arm in that hallway, that the building holding his entire party, every chandelier, every marble floor tile, every single square foot of that luxury venue, belonged to a company with my name quietly buried 3 layers deep inside its ownership structure. I looked him dead in the eye, and I gave him exactly 10 minutes to pack up his entire party and get out. Stick around for this whole story, because you are not ready for the look on his face once security walked in and asked who they actually needed to escort out that back door. Smash the like button, drop a comment, and hit subscribe right now before we get into it. My name is Vanessa Cole, and I am 32 years old. I grew up in Lowell, Massachusetts, in a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. My mother worked it 6 days a week. My father left when I turned 5 years old, and I barely remember him beyond a few blurry photographs my mother kept in a shoebox under her bed. My mother, Rosa Cole, raised me completely alone, folding other people's clothes for minimum wage while somehow finding the energy to help me with homework every single night. We never had much money growing up. I wore the same 3 outfits on constant rotation through most of elementary school, and I remember feeling genuine embarrassment whenever a classmate mentioned a vacation or a new pair of shoes that came from somewhere other than the discount rack. My mother told me, more times than I can count, that our situation felt temporary, that hard work eventually opened doors nobody could slam shut again. School felt like 2 completely different worlds depending on which classroom I sat in. My public school in Lowell held plenty of kids just like me, kids whose parents worked double shifts and skipped meals so their children never noticed the sacrifice. But once I earned a partial scholarship to attend a private high school across town, everything shifted dramatically. Suddenly, I sat beside kids whose families owned summer homes on Cape Cod, kids who complained about their allowance not covering a new phone every single year. My best friend during those high school years, a girl named Priya Anand, came from a similarly modest background herself, her parents running a small Indian restaurant near our school. Priya and I bonded instantly over shared exhaustion, watching wealthier classmates treat casual extravagance like something completely ordinary, while we counted every single dollar our families earned. I worked my first job at 15, cleaning rooms at a small motel near the highway, learning the hospitality business from the ground floor upward in the most literal sense possible. The owner, an older woman named Beatrice Nolan, took a genuine interest in my work ethic, teaching me everything about running a small property efficiently, from managing bookings to handling difficult guests with patience rather than frustration. I graduated high school and enrolled in a hospitality management program at a state university, working almost full-time hours at Beatrice's motel throughout my entire college experience. My mother cried at my graduation, the first person in our entire family to finish a 4-year degree, and I remember feeling that specific mixture of pride and exhaustion that comes from building something entirely through your own relentless effort. I met Ethan Harrington during my final year of college, working an internship at a boutique hotel in downtown Boston that his family's investment company partially owned. Ethan worked there temporarily himself, learning the hospitality side of his family's broader real estate empire before eventually moving into their corporate offices permanently. Ethan felt completely different from anyone I had ever dated. He treated hotel staff with genuine respect rather than the casual dismissiveness I witnessed from plenty of wealthy guests over the years. He asked thoughtful questions about my background, genuinely interested in understanding exactly how I built my career from cleaning motel rooms into managing front desk operations at an upscale property. We dated secretly for almost 8 months before Ethan finally introduced me to his parents, Preston and Margaret Harrington, owners of a massive real estate and hospitality empire spanning several states. Preston built his fortune decades earlier, acquiring distressed commercial properties throughout New England, transforming them into luxury hotels, event venues, and residential developments worth hundreds of millions of dollars combined. That first dinner with Preston and Margaret remains burned into my memory permanently. Margaret asked pointed questions about my family background, her tone carrying obvious judgment once I mentioned my mother's work at the laundromat. Preston barely acknowledged my presence throughout most of dinner, directing conversation almost entirely toward Ethan and his older brother Wesley, discussing business matters I clearly had zero context to contribute toward. Ethan apologized repeatedly during our drive home that evening, insisting his parents simply needed time adjusting to someone outside their usual social circle. I wanted desperately to believe him, understanding even then that loving someone often meant navigating complicated family dynamics you never fully controlled yourself. If you already sense exactly where this family dynamic heads, drop a comment sharing your prediction and make sure you have hit subscribe, because everything I built quietly over the following years changes absolutely everything about this story. Ethan proposed during my final semester of college, and I said yes without a single moment of hesitation, understanding clearly that his family's obvious disapproval represented a complication we would navigate together rather than something that changed how I genuinely felt about him. Margaret Harrington made her feelings about our engagement painfully clear during a lunch she requested privately, without Ethan present. She told me directly, over expensive salads neither of us actually finished, that families like theirs typically married within similar social circles, suggesting gently but firmly that I might consider whether marrying into their family represented a genuinely realistic long-term situation for someone with my particular background. I left that lunch shaking with anger and humiliation, calling my mother immediately afterward. My mother, wise as always, told me that people who judged others based purely on where they started rather than where genuine hard work eventually led them rarely deserved much consideration in return. Ethan and I married 2 years later in a modest ceremony his family barely tolerated, Preston and Margaret attending reluctantly, while making their continued disapproval obvious through countless small comments throughout the entire event. Wesley, Ethan's older brother, treated me with the same cold dismissiveness his parents modeled, clearly viewing me as someone temporarily attached to the family rather than a permanent addition worth genuine respect. I continued working in hospitality management following our wedding, eventually leaving my position to start something entirely my own. I had spent years learning every possible detail about running successful properties, watching Beatrice Nolan's small motel operation alongside larger corporate properties owned by Ethan's family, developing genuine expertise regarding exactly what made certain venues thrive while others struggled financially. I identified a specific opportunity that Preston's massive company consistently overlooked: smaller historic properties throughout Boston too modest for his large-scale corporate interests, but genuinely valuable once properly renovated and repositioned within the luxury event and boutique hospitality market. I started small, using savings alongside a modest business loan to acquire my very first property, a distressed 19th century building in Boston's South End neighborhood that most investors considered far too risky to bother pursuing. I renovated that first building myself, working alongside contractors during evenings and weekends while maintaining my regular job, learning everything about historic preservation requirements, event space design, and luxury hospitality branding through countless hours of research and hands-on effort. I named my company Cole Heritage Properties, deliberately avoiding any obvious connection to the Harrington name that carried so much complicated baggage within my personal life. My first venue, which I eventually named the Amaranth, opened successfully within 18 months, hosting weddings, corporate events, and private celebrations that generated steady, impressive revenue almost immediately. I kept this entire venture completely separate from Ethan's family, partly out of genuine pride wanting to build something entirely through my own effort, and partly understanding that revealing early success too soon would likely invite Preston's controlling influence into something I desperately wanted to remain entirely mine. Ethan supported my venture completely, though even he remained somewhat unaware of exactly how successful Cole Heritage Properties eventually became, since I structured ownership through a private holding company that kept financial details genuinely confidential, even within our own marriage discussions about daily life and career matters. Wesley, meanwhile, struggled considerably within his father's massive company, making several questionable business decisions that cost the family enterprise significant money over those same years. Preston covered these mistakes repeatedly, never publicly acknowledging Wesley's failures while continuing to treat my own quiet, independent success with complete indifference whenever I mentioned my growing business during rare family gatherings. I acquired a second property 2 years after the Amaranth's successful opening, a stunning former bank building in downtown Boston that I transformed into an even more impressive luxury event venue, eventually named the Sterling Hall. This second property generated substantial revenue almost immediately, hosting some of the most prestigious weddings and corporate galas throughout the entire greater Boston area within its very first year of operation. I want to explain something important about exactly how I structured Cole Heritage Properties, because it matters enormously for everything that eventually happened. I created a layered ownership arrangement, common enough within serious commercial real estate circles, where the actual operating venues technically belonged to limited liability companies managed by a private holding entity, itself owned by a family trust carrying my maiden name rather than anything obviously connected to Vanessa Harrington specifically. This structure existed partly for legitimate tax and liability protection reasons my accountant recommended, and partly, I will admit honestly, because I genuinely enjoyed maintaining complete privacy regarding my growing success away from Preston and Margaret's constant judgment and unwelcome opinions. By my early 30s, Cole Heritage Properties owned 4 separate luxury venues throughout Boston, generating combined annual revenue exceeding $12 million. I lived quietly, driving a modest car and maintaining our comfortable but unremarkable apartment, choosing deliberately to keep my lifestyle understated rather than inviting unwanted attention or questions from Ethan's family regarding exactly how my mysterious business ventures had grown so substantially. If you have ever built something impressive while deliberately keeping it hidden from people who never believed you deserved genuine respect, drop a comment sharing your experience, because everything came crashing together during one single unforgettable anniversary party neither Preston nor Margaret ever saw coming. Preston and Margaret Harrington's 25th wedding anniversary arrived during my 32nd year, and the celebration they planned represented easily the most extravagant event their entire social circle had witnessed in recent memory. Margaret spent nearly an entire year planning every single detail, hiring an expensive event planner, selecting an exclusive guest list exceeding 200 prominent Boston business and society figures, and searching extensively throughout the entire city for exactly the right venue to properly showcase their family's tremendous success and social standing. I learned, roughly 4 months before the actual event, that Margaret had ultimately selected the Sterling Hall for their celebration, my own second property, without any awareness whatsoever regarding my actual connection to its ownership. Margaret mentioned excitedly during a family dinner that she had secured an absolutely stunning historic venue downtown, describing exactly the location and specific architectural details that immediately confirmed she meant my own building. I sat there at that dinner table, genuinely stunned by this coincidence, deciding almost instantly to keep my ownership completely private rather than immediately revealing information that would likely complicate Margaret's excited planning process. My venue manager at the Sterling Hall, a trusted employee named Camille Foster, who understood my privacy preferences completely, agreed to handle all booking communications directly without ever mentioning my personal connection to Margaret's planning team. Those following months proved genuinely strange, watching Margaret and her event planner communicate regularly with Camille regarding countless details, while I maintained complete silence regarding my actual ownership throughout the entire elaborate planning process. Ethan remained completely unaware as well, since I genuinely wanted to observe exactly how his parents treated my staff and my venue before deciding whether revealing my connection served any genuine purpose. What I witnessed during those months troubled me considerably. Margaret treated Camille and the entire Sterling Hall staff with obvious condescension throughout every planning meeting, making demanding, often unreasonable requests while barely acknowledging basic courtesy toward people working diligently to accommodate her elaborate vision. Preston occasionally accompanied Margaret during site visits, making comments about staff competency that Camille later relayed to me with genuine hurt and frustration evident in her voice. I felt my anger building steadily throughout those months, watching my own family members treat my dedicated employees so poorly, while remaining completely oblivious regarding exactly whose building they occupied during every single planning session. The night of the actual anniversary party finally arrived on a warm evening in early June. I dressed carefully that evening, wearing an elegant navy gown, understanding I would blend seamlessly among Boston's wealthy social elite while carrying private knowledge that gave me considerably more power within that room than anyone present realized. Ethan and I arrived together, greeted warmly by several guests we knew from various family gatherings over recent years. The Sterling Hall looked absolutely magnificent that evening, string lights woven carefully throughout the restored original architecture, elegant floral arrangements filling every corner, exactly the stunning atmosphere I had originally envisioned when transforming that historic building years earlier. Preston approached me roughly an hour into the evening, his expression carrying an unusual intensity I recognized immediately as trouble brewing. He pulled me aside toward a quiet corner near the main bar, his voice low but sharp with obvious irritation. He said, "Vanessa, I need to speak with you privately for a moment." I followed him toward a narrow hallway near the kitchen entrance, genuinely confused regarding exactly what prompted this sudden conversation. Preston's expression carried barely contained frustration once we reached relative privacy away from the main celebration. He said, "I received some concerning information tonight regarding your business dealings, Vanessa. Wesley mentioned overhearing something troubling from one of the catering staff, suggesting you might be involved in some kind of questionable financial situation." I felt genuine confusion, having absolutely no idea what specific misunderstanding Preston referenced. He continued, his voice growing increasingly agitated, explaining that Wesley apparently overheard staff discussing unpaid vendor invoices somewhere within Cole Heritage Properties. Information Wesley immediately assumed confirmed his long-standing suspicion that I represented nothing more than someone who married into money while secretly struggling financially herself. I attempted explaining calmly that whatever Wesley overheard likely involved a completely unrelated situation, promising to investigate the specific concern directly. Preston, however, had already convinced himself entirely regarding his own narrative, his frustration boiling over into something considerably harsher than I expected even given his usual dismissive attitude toward me. He said, gripping my arm tightly enough that I genuinely winced, "Vanessa, I think it's time you understood something clearly tonight. A penniless loser has absolutely no business standing among 200 of Boston's most prominent families. I want you using the back entrance near the kitchen, right now, before you embarrass this family any further in front of our guests. If you cannot believe what you just read, imagine actually standing there hearing those exact words from your own father-in-law. Drop a comment sharing your reaction and make absolutely sure you have hit subscribe, because everything I said next completely destroyed Preston's entire evening." I stood there in that narrow hallway, Preston's fingers still gripping my arm, feeling something inside me shift completely from hurt into something considerably steadier and more resolved. I said calmly, "Preston, let go of my arm." He released his grip slightly, though his expression remained hard and unyielding. He said, "I'm serious, Vanessa. This family has tolerated your presence for years now, but tonight represents an important evening for people who genuinely matter within our social circle. I won't have you embarrassing us further." I took a slow breath, understanding clearly that the moment I had unconsciously prepared for over recent months had finally arrived. I said, "Preston, before I consider leaving anywhere, I think you should know something important about tonight's venue." He stared at me impatiently, clearly expecting some kind of desperate excuse or emotional plea. I continued, "The Sterling Hall belongs to Cole Heritage Properties, a company I founded and personally own. Every single vendor contract, every staff member serving your guests tonight, every square foot of this building answers directly to me." Preston's expression shifted rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and finally something approaching genuine shock. He said, "That's completely absurd, Vanessa. This venue belongs to some private holding company. My event planner handled everything through their management team directly." I said, "Camille Foster is my venue manager, Preston. She's worked for me for 3 years now. I own this building. I own 3 other venues throughout Boston as well, generating combined revenue that likely exceeds whatever comfortable assumptions you've made regarding my supposed financial situation this entire time." Preston stood there completely speechless for several long seconds, his earlier confident aggression rapidly dissolving into obvious confusion and uncertainty. Margaret appeared suddenly from around the corner, clearly having noticed our extended absence from the main celebration, her expression shifting quickly once she sensed the obvious tension between us. She said, "Preston, what exactly is happening here?" Preston, still processing everything I had just revealed, attempted explaining the situation to Margaret with obvious difficulty, finding appropriate words. I decided, standing there in that hallway, that the moment had arrived for complete, undeniable clarity rather than allowing any further confusion or misunderstanding to continue. I said, loudly enough that several nearby guests began noticing our conversation, "Margaret, Preston just informed me that a penniless loser has no business remaining at tonight's celebration, insisting I leave immediately through the back entrance near the kitchen." Margaret's face drained visibly of color, clearly recognizing instantly how poorly this entire situation reflected upon their family in front of increasingly curious nearby guests. She said, quietly, attempting damage control, "Vanessa, I'm certain Preston simply misspoke in a moment of stress regarding tonight's planning." I said, "Preston didn't misspeak, Margaret. He gripped my arm tightly enough to leave a mark, and he specifically instructed me to use the service entrance like hired help rather than family, all because Wesley apparently overheard some completely unrelated conversation and jumped immediately toward the worst possible assumption regarding my character." Wesley appeared nearby, drawn by the growing commotion, his expression shifting uncomfortably once he realized exactly what conversation he had apparently triggered through his own careless assumptions. I turned directly toward him, my voice steady despite the anger building steadily throughout my entire body. I said, "Wesley, whatever conversation you overheard tonight involved vendor payment scheduling completely unrelated to any financial trouble. Cole Heritage Properties generates over $12 million annually across 4 venues throughout Boston, including this exact building we're currently standing inside right now." The surrounding guests, several now clearly listening intently despite polite attempts appearing otherwise engaged, began whispering among themselves as this entire dramatic scene unfolded rapidly in front of increasingly wider portions of Preston's carefully curated social circle. Preston attempted recovering some semblance of composure, his voice noticeably less confident than moments earlier. He said, "Vanessa, I think we should discuss this privately, away from tonight's guests." I said, "We're finished discussing anything privately tonight, Preston. You made your feelings extremely clear moments ago, in front of witnesses, and I think everyone here deserves complete honesty regarding exactly what just happened." I pulled out my phone, calling Camille directly while Preston and Margaret stood there watching helplessly. Camille answered quickly, and I explained the situation briefly, asking her to have our head of security meet me directly near the main hallway. If you're wondering exactly what happened once security arrived, drop a comment guessing your prediction, and make sure you've subscribed, because Preston's entire evening was about to get considerably worse. Our head of security, a calm, professional man named Derek Alvarez, who had worked alongside me since the Sterling Hall's original opening, arrived within minutes, having received Camille's urgent call explaining the general situation unfolding. I said, loudly enough that the growing crowd of curious guests clearly heard every word. Derek, Preston Harrington just physically grabbed my arm and instructed me to leave my own building through the service entrance. I want everyone here understanding clearly exactly who owns tonight's venue. Derek nodded professionally, immediately positioning himself near Preston with the calm authority of someone genuinely prepared to handle exactly this kind of escalating situation. Preston's face had turned noticeably pale, clearly realizing the full magnitude of his earlier confident dismissiveness, now unfolding disastrously in front of everyone whose opinion he genuinely valued. I turned toward the gathered crowd, several guests now openly watching this entire dramatic scene rather than maintaining polite pretense of disinterest. I said, "I apologize for this disruption tonight. My name is Vanessa Cole, and I own the Sterling Hall along with 3 other venues throughout Boston through Cole Heritage Properties. Preston Harrington, my father-in-law, just informed me that someone he considers a penniless loser has no business attending his anniversary celebration, and he demanded I leave immediately through the kitchen entrance." Gasps rippled audibly throughout the nearby crowd, several prominent guests exchanging obviously shocked glances, while Preston stood there completely frozen, his earlier commanding presence entirely evaporated. I continued, my voice steady and clear. Given tonight's circumstances, I think it's only fair that Preston and Margaret experience exactly the same treatment they attempted forcing upon me moments ago. You have exactly 10 minutes to gather your belongings and arrange transportation for your remaining guests, because this venue's booking is officially terminated effective immediately. Margaret's composure completely shattered at this point, her voice rising with genuine desperation. She said, "Vanessa, please, this is completely unnecessary. We can discuss this reasonably." I said, "Margaret, you stood there moments ago allowing your husband to physically grab me and demand I use a service entrance like hired staff. I think tonight's consequences feel entirely reasonable given everything that just happened." Preston attempted one final desperate appeal, his voice noticeably shaking now. He said, "Vanessa, please, think about Ethan. Think about our family. We can absolutely work through this misunderstanding." I said, "Ethan deserves parents who treat his wife with basic human respect, regardless of where she started in life. I've watched you and Margaret dismiss my accomplishments for years now, assuming my success meant nothing simply because it arrived through different paths than whatever you consider acceptable within your particular social circle." Ethan appeared suddenly beside me, having heard enough commotion to abandon whatever conversation previously occupied his attention elsewhere in the venue. He looked between his parents and me with obvious confusion, quickly processing the tension filling that entire hallway. I explained everything briefly to Ethan, watching his expression shift rapidly from confusion into genuine anger once he fully understood exactly what his father had said and done moments earlier. He turned toward Preston, his voice carrying a firmness I had genuinely never witnessed from him previously during any interaction with his parents. He said, "Dad, you grabbed my wife's arm and told her to leave through the service entrance at our own venue." Preston attempted explaining himself weakly, though his words carried little genuine conviction at this point. Ethan shook his head slowly, clearly done tolerating years of his family's dismissive treatment toward someone he genuinely loved. He said, "Vanessa's decision stands completely. You have 10 minutes." Derek and his security team began politely, but firmly assisting Preston and Margaret's remaining guests toward the exit over the following several minutes, the elaborate anniversary celebration effectively concluding in complete disarray, rather than the triumphant evening Margaret had spent an entire year meticulously planning. Preston and Margaret left that evening in stunned silence, their carefully cultivated social reputation considerably damaged among exactly the prominent guests whose opinions they valued most desperately throughout their entire adult lives. I think about that hallway often these days, remembering exactly how quickly years of quiet dismissal transformed into complete, undeniable clarity, the moment I finally revealed everything I had built entirely through my own determined effort. Preston spent years assuming my background meant something fixed and permanent, never once considering that hard work often builds considerably more than obvious inherited wealth ever could. Ethan and I moved forward stronger following that difficult evening. His relationship with his parents fundamentally changed as he finally recognized patterns he had unconsciously excused for years throughout our entire relationship. Preston and Margaret eventually apologized, though genuine trust took considerably longer rebuilding than any single conversation could accomplish immediately. Cole Heritage Properties continues thriving today, and I stopped hiding my success purely out of unnecessary caution, understanding finally that genuine accomplishment deserves recognition regardless of whether certain people ever choose acknowledging it graciously themselves. If there's one thing I hope you take from everything I've shared today, it's this. Never let anyone convince you that where you started determines your entire worth as a person. Sometimes the quietest, most determined builders end up owning considerably more than the loudest critics ever imagined possible. Thank you so much for staying with me through this entire story today. I would genuinely love hearing your own thoughts down in the comments section below. Have you ever had someone underestimate exactly what you were quietly building for yourself? What do you think the real lesson here actually is? Please share your own experience, because these comments genuinely mean so much to me. And if this story resonated with you even slightly, please hit that subscribe button, because there are so many more stories exactly like this one coming your way very soon.